Good morning, Facebook. Oh, got to adjust the camera a little bit. There we go. Okay, here we go. Today is April 23rd, 2020. April 23rd, 2020. Is it Thursday? I'm literally losing track of what day of the week it is. The only thing I ever have to do on any given day is wait for Sunday to file my weekly unemployment claim. Yes, it's Thursday. Wow. Thursday, April 23rd. It is 11:28 Pacific Daylight Time, and off we go. Beginning with world figures, there are now being reported 2,692,584 cases of COVID-19 worldwide. Of that number, 188,075 deaths from COVID-19 have been reported to worldometers.info/coronavirus. In first place of that number, the United States, 866,105 cases, and the United States is approaching 50,000. Currently, we're sitting at 48,809 fatalities. In second place is Spain, with 213,024 cases, and they are reporting a death toll of 22,157. In third place is Italy, in fourth place is France, and in fifth place is Germany. I want to draw attention to those first five ranked nations: the United States, Spain, Italy, France, and Germany, and the United Kingdom. Okay, the first six. Immediately after that, we've got Turkey, Iran, China, Russia, Brazil, Belgium. So I noticed something about that. The top six worst affected countries on Earth within the coronavirus pandemic are all very much Western civilization cornerstones. These nations are all very important pillars of Western civilization. And then as soon as you go down from the United Kingdom, you got Turkey. Turkey's a member of the European Union, but they're also an ancient country. I don't know how much of a Western nation they might be, followed by Iran, China, Russia, Brazil, and Belgium. So I'm going to come back to that point a little bit later on, but as long as I'm beginning with world figures, I wanted to make that point. The top six most badly affected countries of the coronavirus pandemic are all very much Western countries in terms of Western civilization. So I will come back to that. But for now, I'm going to look at national figures. Again, the United States, 866,105 total positive or confirmed cases, and 48,809 fatalities. New York State, 268,512 positive or confirmed cases, 20,792 fatalities. Followed by New Jersey, 99,989. That's probably already, since I printed this out, breached the 100,000 mark. New Jersey is reporting 5,368 total fatalities. In the state of Washington, 12,494. 12,494 reported positive or confirmed cases in the state of Washington, and 692 Washingtonians have lost their lives. What's interesting, Texas. Texas is doing considerably worse than we are with respect to their total number of reported positive cases. Texas has 21,944 positive or confirmed cases, but only 561 deaths. That's compared to Washington, which has just over half the number of cases Texas has, but we're sitting at nearly 700 deaths. So Texas apparently is experiencing a far lower infection fatality rate than is the state of Washington. I didn't take the time to crunch the exact percentages, but just, again, Texas is reporting 561 fatalities out of a total of nearly 22,000 cases. Washington's reporting 692 out of 12,494. What's up with that discrepancy, huh? I have an idea, which I will probably get into at some point today, but again, just like to point out those kinds of glaring inconsistencies because I think that it points to a broader point. Okay, I want to quickly look at the numbers for Nebraska. Nebraska, 1,813 positive or confirmed cases, and 45 Nebraskans have died. The least affected state at this point is, once again, Alaska at 335 cases with 9 deaths. Wyoming is not second from last, but rather third to last now. Wyoming's reporting 447 cases and 6 fatalities. I talked a couple days ago about seroprevalence and various seroprevalence surveys taking place across the country. The two that I referred to in particular was one in Santa Clara County and then another one in Los Angeles County, done by the University of Southern California. Each of these independently confirmed that there was a much higher statistical rate of people who had contracted coronavirus at some point and then gotten better from it. They were able to determine this by discovering the presence of antibodies in the blood of the people who were tested. These antibodies indicate that these individuals got the virus, got sick, got better, and then went back to their lives, having developed a natural immunity to COVID-19. These tests sampled groups of people. I believe the group of people sampled in the Santa Clara test, for instance, was something like 3,300 people. And they used that figure to extrapolate how much higher the entire county, the Santa Clara County might have been. They used a small sample to indicate what the entire county might have looked like, and that figure indicates that the number of people who actually got coronavirus and got better from it was something like 50 to 85 times higher than is being reported by the official figures, the worldometers.info, the coronavirus task force. The numbers that they are reporting that inform these graphs and charts that we see presented by Dr. Birx at the White House and Dr. Fauci. These numbers, these official numbers, point to a far lower infection rate but a far higher infection fatality rate than is being suggested by these seroprevalence surveys. And again, this is a survey that's been repeated twice in California, once in Santa Clara County and once in Los Angeles County. And now there is talk of another such seroprevalence survey occurring in the state of New York. My prediction is that provided this survey is allowed to continue unobstructed and unfettered, we're going to see the same kind of results in the state of New York. The state of New York, which is reporting 268,512 cases. Easily more than double the second place state. And accounting for a huge portion, somewhere between 1/4 and 1/3 of the total cases in the United States, all within New York. But I'm imagining the number of those infected is going to emerge as being way higher with these antibody tests. But of course, the number of those who have lost their lives is going to be a constant number, which will mean that the infection fatality rate is going to emerge as being, yesterday I think I said it was under 1%, maybe even under 1/2 of 1%. A closer look at the numbers suggests that the infection fatality rate could be as low as 0.1%. But you know what's interesting? These tests, these seroprevalence surveys, and the results that they are producing are coming under relentless attack. People are doing everything they can to diminish their credibility and to encourage people to ignore them and dismiss them as not being valid. There are reasons for this. I think I asked it a couple days ago. Why would anyone not want this to be true? I believe that I had coronavirus in the first half or the very middle section of January. I've commented a couple times here on this broadcast that I had a nasty stomach bug the day after Christmas and had to leave work and stay home for a couple of days, but that less than 3 weeks later, I came down with a really ugly virus that cost me my voice. I couldn't get out of bed. I felt awful, but I recovered and went back to work. I believe that many, many, many people in the United States have gone through something just like what I went through, and that the number of people within our country who've caught this virus and recovered from it and are now essentially immune to it because we have the antibodies, I believe that number is enormous. But the number of people who've passed away remains constant, meaning the mortality rate is really, really low, especially as compared to what we're being told by the official numbers, by the CDC, by the WHO, and by the Coronavirus Task Force. We are looking at trying to reopen our country. We are looking at trying to get people back to work. We are looking at trying to resurrect the economy, which is now decimated. Some 26 million people have now applied for unemployment benefits nationwide. 26 million. Just since this coronavirus pandemic and the associated mitigation efforts began. In the interest of trying to make sure that our recovery is not polluted, let's say, by other people from other countries immigrating into the United States and taking the jobs that are waiting for American citizens to reclaim once these restrictions are lifted, the president has signed an executive order suspending entry of immigrants who present risk to the United States labor market during the economic recovery following the COVID-19 outbreak. There was no big signing ceremony with the media in the room for this, and at the time that the president and the Coronavirus Task Force held their daily press availability at the White House yesterday, the details of it had not yet been released to any media outlets. I'm going to share a little bit of it with you here. The 2019 novel coronavirus has significantly disrupted the livelihoods of Americans. In Proclamation 9994 of March 13, 2020, declaring a national emergency concerning the novel coronavirus disease outbreak, the president declared that the COVID-19 outbreak in the United States constituted a national emergency, beginning March 1, 2020. Since then, the American people have united behind a policy of mitigation strategies, including social distancing, to flatten the curve of infections and reduce the spread of the disease, the virus that causes COVID-19 called SARS-CoV-2. This needed behavioral shift has taken a toll on the United States economy, with national unemployment claims reaching historic levels. In the days between the national emergency declaration and April 11, 2020, more than 22 million Americans have filed for unemployment. In the administration of our nation's immigration system, we must be mindful of the impact of foreign workers on the United States labor market, particularly in an environment of high domestic unemployment and depressed demand for labor. We must also conserve critical State Department resources so that consular officers may continue to provide services to United States citizens abroad. Even with their ranks diminished by staffing disruptions caused by the pandemic, consular officers continue to provide assistance to United States citizens, including through the ongoing evacuation of many Americans stranded overseas. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. I, therefore, now, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States, by the authority vested in me by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, hereby find that entry into the United States of persons described in Section 1 of this proclamation would, except as provided for in Section 2 of this proclamation, be detrimental to the interests of the United States, and that their entry should be subject to certain restrictions, limitations, and exceptions. Then the executive order goes on to be more specific in terms of who exactly is going to be restricted from entering the United States. There are some common sense exceptions to this. For instance, the suspension and limitation of entry pursuant to Section 1 of this proclamation shall not apply to any lawful permanent resident of the United States, any alien seeking to enter the United States on an immigration visa as a physician, nurse, or other healthcare professional, any alien applying for a visa to enter the United States pursuant to the EB-5 Immigration Investor Program, any alien who is the spouse of a United States citizen will not be barred entry. Any alien who is under 21 and is the child of a United States citizen or who is a prospective adoptee seeking to enter the United States pursuant to the IR-4 or IH-4 visa classifications. And then it goes on. So, immigration into the United States has been suspended pending the recovery of the United States economy, because it is being perceived that admitting immigrants into the United States and into our labor market will be disruptive to our national recovery from these mitigation efforts and from the lockdown. Makes sense to me, and I understand something like over 80 to 85% of the American people polled about this approve of and accept this proclamation. I do too. It's going to be interesting to see exactly how people who oppose the president are going to try to frame this as being something evil. Now, shifting from national policy to state policy, Governor Inslee came on television and he made a statement about how we're going to reopen the state economy. He did so very shortly after a series of protests took place. And I came on yesterday and I looked in detail at what his statement said about how our state is going to return to a state of normalcy. Every single of the various states are going to have their own plans. And so obviously it's important to look at how Washington is going to look at this. I'm not impressed. I said on this broadcast yesterday that there was no substance to the plan. He came out and just gave us a bunch of empty platitudes, and I was kind of insulted by it. Let's re-examine it a little bit. In the coming days and weeks, this is from the substance of his statement. In the coming days and weeks, the governor will appoint 3 leadership groups consisting of key community figures to advise the governor on 1. Public health and our healthcare system, 2. Economic recovery and safe return to work, and 3. Social supports to the most vulnerable and those affected by COVID-19. The governor's office will actively engage with and seek input from all levels of government and other members of communities. Those were the only things that were delineated within his statement. The rest of it was all just a big statement to provide an atmosphere around which these 3 things are being established. And these 3 things are just groups of people who are going to talk about things together and who then are going to come talk to the governor. And then the governor is going to come on television and talk to us some more. That's all it is. there's a bunch of people talking, so I'm going to organize the talking into this group that are going to talk about this, and then this group's going to talk about that, and that group over there, well, they're going to talk about this, and they're all going to talk, and then they're going to come talk to me, and then I'm going to come on television and talk to you guys some more, and that's our plan. Ugh. Well, when I made the characterization yesterday that there was nothing to the governor's so-called plan, I wondered if I hadn't missed something. So I spent considerable time after yesterday's broadcast going back and reading the text that you can find on the governor's website and on his medium.com page. And that's all I came up with, these three groups that are going to talk about those three different subjects to advise the governor. And then the rest of it was just to loosely delineate some sort of framework within which our recovery efforts may begin. But other people's reactions have been similar to mine, such as the Snohomish County Sheriff. The Snohomish County Sheriff has declared publicly that he is not going to enforce the governor's ban. And he released a rather lengthy statement on Facebook. I'm going to share some of that with you now. This, again, is from the sheriff of Snohomish County. His name is Sheriff Adam Fortney. And this was a statement shared on Facebook on April 21st at about 8:35 p.m. Snohomish County residents and business owners, I just watched the governor's speech to Washingtonians regarding our approach to getting Washington back in business, and I am left to wonder if he even has a plan. Didn't I say this yesterday? I think I did. To be quite honest, he continues, I wasn't even sure what he was trying to say half the time. I'm with you there, man. He has no plan. He has no details. This is simply not good enough in times when we have taken such drastic measures as the suspension of constitutional rights. I wrote most of this about 2 weeks ago, but I decided to wait out of respect for the governor and my own misguided hope that each day he did a press conference, he would say something to me, or rather, he would say something with some specificity on getting Washington back to work. After what I witnessed tonight, I can no longer stay silent, as I'm not even sure he knows what he is doing or knows what struggles Washingtonians face right now. I want to start by saying this virus is very real, and sadly it has taken 97 lives in Snohomish County. This is a very serious issue, and the appropriate precautions need to be taken to protect our most vulnerable populations. However, our communities have already shown and continue to show that they understand the severity of the situation and are doing all they can already to keep themselves, their families, and their neighbors safe and healthy. I am worried about the economy, and I'm worried about Washingtonians that need to make a living for their family. As more data floods in week by week and day by day about this pandemic, I think it's clear that the models have not been entirely accurate. Haven't I already been saying that to all of you? I think I have. He continues, while that is okay, we cannot continue down the same path we've been on if the government reaction does not fit the data, or even worse, the same government reaction makes our situation worse. I'm going to pause there for a second. Let's look very briefly at how these mitigation efforts might be making the situation worse. Well, it's easy to see how they might be making things worse for people in their daily lives and for the economy of the state and for the financial situations of the various citizens. But there's other dimensions to it. I talked about the psychological well-being. But then also think about this, and I think I've touched on this before as well. If we stay here, stay locked down, stay isolated from each other, that's not eradicating the virus. The virus is still out there. It's preventing people from getting sick. But as soon as people emerge from this hibernation, this enforced hibernation, the virus is still going to be out there. There's no vaccine. There's no cure. So simply preventing people from getting sick preventing people from developing antibodies and preventing people from developing an immunity to this, which would then expand through the population as what is being called a herd immunity. We might be preventing people from getting sick, but what happens several months down the line when we're all back out amongst each other and back within the comings and goings of society again? The virus is still going to be among us. So what really is this solving? I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and try to get to the substance. All right, the sheriff of Snohomish County's statement continues. As I have previously stated, I have not carried out any enforcement of the current stay-at-home order. As this order has continued on for well over a month, and a majority of our residents cannot return to work to provide for their families, I have received a lot of outreach from concerned members of our community asking if Governor Inslee's order is a violation of our constitutional rights. As your Snohomish County Sheriff, yes, I believe that preventing business owners to operate their businesses and provide for their families intrudes on our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I am greatly concerned for our small business owners and single-income families who have lost their primary source of income needed for survival. As your elected sheriff, I will always put your constitutional rights above policies or popular opinion. We have the right to peaceably assemble. We have the right to keep and bear arms. We have the right to attend church service of any denomination. The impacts of COVID-19 no longer warrant the suspension of our constitutional rights. Along with other elected sheriffs around our state, the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office will not be enforcing an order preventing religious freedoms or constitutional rights. I strongly encourage each of you to reach out and contact your council members, local leaders, and state representatives to demand we allow businesses to begin reopening and allow our residents, all of them, to return to work if they choose to do so. The great thing about Snohomish County government is that we have all worked very well together during the crisis. I'm not saying we agree all of the time. I'm saying we have the talent and ability to get this done for Snohomish County. This is not a time to blindly follow. This is a time to lead the way. And again, that is a statement by Sheriff Adam Fortney, Sheriff of Snohomish County, released on his Facebook page 2 days ago. This is happening all over the state. Franklin County, their county commissioners all said that they weren't going to be abiding by it. Predictably, the governor's office hasn't taken too kindly to this. It is disappointing when elected officials promote illegal activity that puts their community's well-being at risk. This is a statement from Governor Inslee's office. People's lives are deeply impacted by the crisis even. We are working to turn the tide on COVID-19 and begin lifting restrictions. These decisions are guided by science. Our priority is keeping Washingtonians healthy. The governor's office sent a letter to Franklin County commissioners this morning making clear their actions on Tuesday does not change the fact that businesses and residents in their county must follow the state's emergency orders to keep everyone healthy. We have discussed the statements made by Snohomish County Sheriff, and the Attorney General's office will be reaching out to Sheriff Fortney directly. Oh, it looks like you're in trouble, Sheriff Fortney. The prosecutors have informed our office they agree the state's orders are legal. The Snohomish County Sheriff and Franklin County Commission are misleading business owners and individuals in their jurisdictions, putting people's health at risk and potentially putting them on the wrong side of the law. So yeah, they're gonna go after these guys. So I can't imagine the Snohomish County Sheriff didn't know he was going to be incurring that kind of legal repercussions. From a certain point of view, what he's doing could be viewed as an act of bravery. Well, speaking of things that aren't acts of bravery, a little while ago, I don't remember exactly how long it's been. Let's see. I think I have it in front of me. There was a Democratic lawmaker who came out and said that she wanted the president to be tried at The Hague for crimes against humanity. And I remember going through this and talking about it in some detail because crimes against humanity is something that's pretty clearly spelled out within the International Criminal Court. It's also worth pointing out that the United States as a nation is not even a signatory to the Rome Statute, and therefore the International Criminal Court has no jurisdiction over us. So I went on to kind of draw out in my mind how ridiculous this is. Well, it's happened again. The first thing, when this happened, this Democratic lawmaker, she was a state representative within the state of Ohio, I believe, State Representative Tavia Golonsky. Well, it's happened again. But now, these same kind of sentiments are being issued by somebody who is a lot more prominent and a lot more famous. We're talking about Ayanna Pressley. You guys recognize that name? She's a member of the Squad. You know, that little quartet of female socialists led by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Well, it's Ayanna Pressley. And now she is saying that President Trump's coronavirus response is akin to war crimes. Claiming criminal negligence, science denials, and a sluggish response, she said the United States was now playing catch-up during the pandemic, which is the last place you want to be in the midst of any public crisis. Pressley said relief efforts shouldn't discriminate based on race, income, or immigration status, and advocated for universal paid leave, sick pay for all workers, and long-term financial assistance. She says, "This hurt is unprecedented. It is being felt by everyone, and the relief should be felt by everyone." War crimes, huh? That makes no sense. It's just the same arguments that I made against the idea that the president should be held up on charges of crimes against humanity hold even more with the suggestion that he's guilty of war crimes. Ayanna Pressley doesn't know what the hell she's talking about. All she knows is that making a severe and melodramatic statement against the president like this, in her mind apparently, means that she is enlightened and on the right side of history. I couldn't disagree more. Whatever problems you think you're solving are not going to be solved by doing stunts like that. Cut the drama and do something real. Stop wasting time. As I've mentioned a number of times throughout the course of this broadcast, there are a series of motivating factors behind the current situation. Behind why anybody would want to see this situation last one day longer, much less weeks, months, or even over a year from now until a vaccine can be discovered and distributed to the public. Why would anybody want this to continue? Well, I have noticed that some of the same people who are out there consistently and constantly attacking the White House coronavirus task force, the president himself, and the policies implemented by them are the same people who've been attacking the current administration ever since June of 2015. Forgetting the drama of the previous presidential campaign, we can look at what's happened just since election night in 2016. It began with protests all over the country. Not my president, not my president. You know, little social justice warrior types going out through the streets in tears, finding anybody with a camera, approaching them and saying, I saw one in particular I'll never forget, this young lady, if they identified as one, I guess I couldn't tell, still can't, on camera saying, oh my God, my transgender friend is going to get kicked out of the country because of Trump. This was on election night. People out in the streets protesting with their fists in the air, claiming, not my president, not my president, literally going on camera and telling anyone who will listen that their transgender friend was going to get kicked out of the country because of Trump. Where does that even come from? Kicked out of the country because they were transgender? Where does that even? That's entirely a fabrication of an over-fertile and quite deranged imagination, if you ask me. But it began with those protests, and those protests went from being chaotic. In one case, in Portland, Oregon, it devolved into a full-on riot. But after that, the opposition began to gain some semblance of cohesion, and there were attempts and organized rallies against the Electoral College to try to bully the Electoral College members into voting in bad faith. That backfired. There was attacks against the transition. There were attempts to disrupt the inauguration. And then once the presidency began, there were just a series of things. Remember Stormy Daniels, that porn star who said that she and the president had an extramarital sexual affair? She since has come out and said that it never happened. She herself, Stormy Daniels, has come out and said that never happened. But she had that lawyer working for her, Michael Avenatti, this guy that's now disgraced and was taken out of a court hearing in handcuffs because of his corruption and his malfeasance. And this guy was actually considered as a viable possible candidate for president. Do you remember that? Well, anyway, when that was over, there was the whole Brett Kavanaugh thing. After the Brett Kavanaugh thing, there was, well, all throughout, there was the Russia thing. Then there was the Ukraine phone call, which resulted in the impeachment. Now, none of that worked. None of it. And then, abracadabra, this virus appears. And the first course of action is to directly attack the one achievement that even Trump's most fierce critics have to grudgingly concede has been legitimate and very impressive: the economy. 26 million people are now on unemployment. 26 million. I've commented before that the sentiment that's pushing all this, that's pushing the opposition against this presidential administration, it's not just about one president. I have even made vague reference to a globalist agenda which is directly threatened by the policies of the current presidential administration. And so I wanted to take a little bit of a look at the concept of globalism for just a second. I've also brought some attention recently to a writer by the name of Victor Davis Hanson. He writes for nationalreview.com, and he has a piece here that I would like to share. Has globalism gone off the rails? And actually, this is not something that was written in reaction to anything taking place now. This is not within the context of coronavirus. This came out May 24th, 2017. The West that birthed globalization is now in an open revolt over its own offspring, from here in Eastern Europe to Southern Ohio. He wrote this in Prague. About half of the population of Europe and the United States seems to want to go back to the world that existed before the 1980s, more control of their own destinies and traditions. The Czech Republic, to take one example, joined the European Union in 2004, but it has not yet adopted the euro and cannot decide whether the European Union is wisely preventing wars of the past from being repeated or is recklessly strangling freedom in the matter of the old Soviet Union, or both. In places devastated by globalization, such as southern Michigan, or I can't pronounce the name of that town in France, underemployed youth in their mid-20s often live at home in prolonged adolescence without much hope of enjoying the pre-globalized lifestyles of their parents. Eastern Europeans are now discovering those globalized trade-offs are so common in Western Europe as they watch rates of marriage, home ownership, and child rearing decline. Over half of the West, the half that lives mostly on the seacoasts of American and Western Europe, loves globalization. The highly educated and cosmopolitan citizens of the world have done well through international finance, insurance, investments, technology, education, and trade. as the old Western markets of 1 billion people became world markets of 6 billion consumers. These coastal Westerners often feel more of an affinity with foreigners like themselves than with fellow countrymen who live 100 miles inland. And they are not shy in lecturing their poorer brethren to shape up and get with their globalized program. Late 20th century globalization, a synonym for westernization, brought a lot of people to both poorer Western countries and the non-Western world. Czech farmers now have equipment comparable to what's used in Iowa. Even those who live in the Amazon basin now have access to antibiotics and eyeglasses. South Koreans have built and enjoyed cars and television sets as if they invented them. But all that said, we have never really resolved the contradictions of globalization. Does it really bring people together into a shared world order? Or does it simply offer a high-tech and often explosive veneer to non-Western cultures that are antithetical to the very West that they so borrow from and copy? An Islamic State terrorist does not hate the United States any less because he now wears hoodies and sneakers and can text his girlfriend. More likely, Western fashion and high-tech toys only empower radical Islamic hatred of Western values. If an airport in Denver looks like one in Beijing, or if a grenade launcher in Syria seems familiar to those used at Fort Bragg, are China and the radical Islamic world therefore becoming more like the United States? Or are they adopting Western ideas and weapons while accentuating their far deeper cultural and historical differences? Iran is desperate for nuclear technology, originally spawned from the Great Satan, in order to better destroy the Great Satan. Another paradox of globalization is a new passive-aggressive attitude inside the West. And, as an aside, here in Seattle, the Seattle passive-aggressive, the Seattle freeze. I think anybody local to this region can identify with the following passage. Elites who benefit from westernized globalization often gain enough wealth and leisure to have the latitude to trash it, almost as a way of dealing with their own guilt over their exalted status. At no time in the history of Western civilization have American college students ever been so pampered with latte bars, trauma counselors, rock climbing walls, and upscale student unions, and yet so critical of the very global civilization that guaranteed them such bounty. Those in the former Third World constantly berate the West for its supposed sins of imperialism, colonialism, and exploitation, while millions of their own citizens risk their very lives to cross the Mediterranean or the U.S.-Mexico border to enter and live in the West. Is the message, "I hate the West, so please let me in"? The cult of multiculturalism is also a paradox. Under globalization, the West seeks to spread its values along with its iPhones as if Western values were far preferable to the alternatives. But a chief tenet of globalized multiculturalism is not to judge other cultures by arbitrary Western standards. Many Western elites implicitly believe that their own ideas about democracy, treatment of minority groups, and equality under the law are superior to the alternatives elsewhere. And some expect the rest of the world to eventually look like Malibu, Palo Alto, or the Upper West Side of Manhattan. So if Iran or Chechnya oppresses gays, or if traditional Arab societies institutionalize female genital mutilation, are they homophobic and misogynist, or merely different? And do Westerners look the other way at phobias and oppression abroad, even though they would never do so at home? In truth, globalization is a mere amphetamine. It speeds things up and alters superficial behavior. But let us not fool ourselves into thinking that globalization has fundamentally altered the nature and the culture of those it hooks. Well, I'm going to leave it there. The computer here is telling me that my live stream is continuing, but I'm not able to see the stream on my own screen. I don't know what's going on. I'm just going to end by saying that, as I mentioned at the beginning of this broadcast, it now just so happens to be that the numbers being tabulated and presented the way they are present the image of the top 5 or top 6 countries worst affected by coronavirus happen to all be Western. And I've also begun to illustrate how the opposition to the way that this is being handled, to the opposition to the idea of reopening our economies and ending this lockdown, is coming from the same place as most of the opposition to the president thus far. I look at this as being seen as an opportunity to advance globalist ambitions. Globalist ambitions directly threatened by the current administration and the president and his policies. The numbers are not reliable. These studies in Santa Clara County and Los Angeles County prove that. And that will continue to be proven. But those studies also are being attacked. Only one way of looking at this is deemed acceptable. Everything else is taboo, even as grassroots opposition springs up all over the country. So, it is obvious that Western values and Western civilizations and globalism are very much at odds. And any vehicle which presents itself, the current and most severe being the current pandemic, anything that threatens Western civilization is going to be pounced on. And the attacks that we're seeing against the idea of ending this lockdown have that same distinctive flavor to them as so many other anti-Western sentiments in the past have also uttered. Well, I'm going to stop things there. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Be good to each other.